I had to say it, I'm sick of these 1 minute save points. But setting my frustration aside, what is happening in these latest novel episodes is blowing my mind, not only because of the bloodline reveal of a dysfunctional family, but now we have a disoriented Subaru from falling into an endless sky. He's so disoriented that after reviving, he was unable to apply what he learned. And not just that, remember the loop in Season 4 where the characters kill each other? Well, something similar happened, just on a smaller scale, and as a result of manipulation by an enemy who was introduced a few episodes ago. Today, I will discuss every hidden detail of this latest episode of the novel.
But before starting, a shout out to the new channel members. A thank you to Juan Bustamante, someone I have the pleasure of knowing in person. To Luis, to Ciro, to Scott, to Shizuko, who is a regular viewer on my channel. To Jonathan, to Roix, to Mauricio, to Takofak, another person who has been following me for a while. And finally, to Okabe. That's on the side of my Spanish community. On the side of my English community, I want to thank Knoob and Luciano. But a special double thank you to Knoob, who gave me an extra tip on PayPal. Thank you so much. Now then, let's get started. Welcome to the breakdown of Chapter 33 of Arc 10 of ReZero. The episode starts with Subaru dealing with the fallout of his latest death, confirming certain things we suspected, like how Subaru spent days in the air slowly dying. And it is because of the time he spent in the air that upon returning by death, he still feels the effects of disorientation. In fact, the author did something really interesting in this part. Since Subaru still felt completely disoriented, the narration reflects this by showing us the characters' names written in strange ways. In fact, this was so annoying that I had to pause for a bit to try to guess who the name showing up on the page was referring to. Upon returning, since Subaru was still dizzy, he started throwing up and flailing his body uncontrollably. This part makes me laugh a bit, because apparently Betty got covered in his vomit. Or, well, she didn't get dirty, because I remember her body wasn't affected by those kinds of mundane things. But still, that doesn't change the fact that she must have felt somewhat grossed out. Afterward, Krush asks Felix to please heal him, but the healer was no longer there, and this leaves me wondering, at what point did Felix disappear? I checked the previous episode, and the last time Felix spoke was before the group agreed to go with Subaru and Betty to retrieve the lost item. That means from the moment they start the search, Felix doesn't speak anymore, but the narration says he was in the group. And since Subaru's save point happens minutes after this, it seems safe to say that in the new save point, Felix has already vanished, and nobody noticed. Speaking of the save point though, is anyone else fed up with the save points being so short? While these save points started being like this since the Empire arc, even that had its explanation in the light novel. In case you don't know, the light novel makes it clear in Subaru's inner thoughts that he feels his power disconnected from Satella since the end of Season 4, and that is why his power in that part of the story was acting weird. But that disconnection was fixed later, and even at the end of Aldebaran's betrayal arc, the power allowed him to go back almost 2 days. Yet now, is it a return to just 1 minute before everything goes down? Sure, I know that technically Subaru went back days in time, but in reality, he only has a 1 to 2 minute window to act. It would have been really nice if he went back at least to when they were in Echidna's research room. I know the author can come up with the explanation that because Subaru is currently in a different dimension, the witch is having trouble reaching him, and that turns into a terrible save point. But either way, I want to get all my complaints off my chest right now. Returning to the episode, it is said that after coming back, everyone gets heated, and as we will see later, they start acting much more impulsive. It's as if the part of the brain responsible for controlling their behavior completely disappears, and this causes Melty to just cry and do nothing, while Salim starts fighting with Krush and ends up severely wounded. The most curious thing is that the only one who seems to notice this is Betty, who makes a comment pointing out how weird the situation is. And for me, this is interesting, because remember, she is a spirit, and being a being of that nature, there are certain magics that cannot affect her the same way they do other races or beings. Afterward, Subaru would walk in the direction where Krush went because he knows they will set a trap for her there. But suddenly, he stops hearing any sound, even when he gets attacked, and after being stabbed, he falls into the void, where he dies shortly after, unlike his last time. Here I want to point out a few things. First, what happened that Betty didn't notice her contractor drifted away from her? Either the enemies separated her like in the previous loop, or the sound magic made it impossible for her to hear Subaru walking away. Who knows? Another thing that is interesting to point out is that this sound nullifying magic isn't appearing for the first time. When did it appear? Thinking back, it appeared at the beginning of Arc 9. There is a moment where Ezo uses that magic when talking to Aldebaran and Subaru. Sure, he used it without bad intentions, but I think it's interesting to remember that a precedent for this already exists, and it's made clear that it is a magic derived from Yang magic. The explanation given was that sound didn't simply vanish, but rather the sound was raised to such a high pitch that nobody could perceive it, something like the sounds bats produce. This is proven when Subaru returns, and it's said that he was screaming at a high pitch and scared his companions. By the way, before continuing, Subaru seems to deduce that in his first death, all his companions died the same way he did, meaning exposed to the elements and in freefall. But let's continue. Upon returning from death, more of the same repeats itself. The members are once again affected by the absence of the thing that regulated their emotions, and they start fighting each other. The good thing now is that something that was an open secret gets confirmed for us, which is that Russell placed curse seal marks on the bodies of Salem and Melty. In fact, Salem reveals this before fighting Krush. Once again, we see how each member of the group is affected by the power over emotions. Melty just cries uncontrollably, Salem and Krush fight seriously, and Subaru gets easily irritated to the point of yelling at Betty. Only at the end, when Krush leaves and Betty heals Salem, the protagonist manages to see that the ceiling is about to collapse on his companion and Salem, so he uses the invisible providence to get them out of danger. Unfortunately, this ends up pushing him away from both of them. The most interesting part is that Subaru doesn't seem to suffer recoil from using the invisible providence. This isn't an official explanation, of course, but since Subaru was heavily influenced by emotions at that moment, it seems that helped make the recoil not as bad. Honestly, I like that little theory. Let's remember that usually Teppei doesn't buff Subaru, but rather puts him in a disadvantageous situation where the very conditions of the scenario give him a kind of wild card to use. Now that his emotions are running wild, it's a good way to encourage the use of his invisible providence so he can get out of the situation. There's also the detail that so far he hasn't used Corleones to identify the position of his allies. I want to believe that if he hasn't done it, it's because he is still in shock from the trauma of dying in freefall. Though I would understand if using it to track Felix fails to detect him, and that's because remember that Felix right now doesn't have the best relationship with Subaru. He feels jealous of him, and maybe that negatively affects the range of Corleones. In the end, the episode closes with Melty and Subaru, who are already out of the power that affected their emotions, concluding that some of the beloved children have infiltrated the place. I know it is said there were at least 2 beloved children, and while there might be more, my prediction is that the 2 children who arrived were Reborn and Lycoris. I say it was Reborn because during his introduction in the last interlude, he claims he is able to silence everyone. Plus we see how in his introduction, he silences Lycoris, and not only that, he also points his sword at her. And remember that it was a sword that cut Subaru's rope in his first death? Well, I like to believe Reborn was one of the enemies who showed up. Then the other enemy I think is Lycoris, and although I don't have that much proof for this, I assume she is another of the attackers, since in her introduction, she seemed to be an intense girl when it comes to feelings. And remember that today the enemy made use of feelings to attack? Well, I think Lycoris was the other culprit, but who knows? That would be all my thoughts. Right now I'm finishing up a 1-hour video about Heinkel that I guarantee you will like, so I hope you can forgive the lack of editing. Either way, tomorrow I'll make the video for episode 13 of season 4, so there's plenty of content to come. I hope you liked this. And tell me, what do you think of the latest events in Arc 10? See you next time.